Okay, well, welcome back. Thanks for coming back. It's always hard after a break to get everybody back in because we'd really like to just hang out in the hallway and talk to each other. Promise that we'll give you plenty of opportunity to do that shortly. I'm Dr. Lucinda Mosher. I'm the co-director of the Master of Arts in Chaplaincy program, and it's my great honor to be chairing this panel discussion about where we are at present and what is the future of chaplaincy education here at HIU. So I'm going to just get right to it. We have four wonderful panelists. Quick introduction. I have here Usama Malik, who is, I'm going to get this right by cheating and looking at my notes here. He is a resident chaplain for Muslim Space, a community organization based in Austin, Texas, and he will be my student in a couple of days. And next to him is Dr. Preeta Banerjee, who is the first ever Hindu chaplain at Tufts University and has been my student for about a year, a little more than. And then Lauren Schreiber, who is the co-founder and executive director of Center DC, a Muslim third space that helps people practicing or exploring Islam to grow authentic relationships. And Heather Brubaker, who is a second-year student in HIU's Master of Chaplaincy program, transitioning from being an English teacher to being a chaplain. I think religiously, I'm Christian. We have two Muslims, a Jewish person, and a Hindu. And so that is in itself sort of modeling the present and the future of our program. So my first question to each of you, which you can answer briefly, is what brought you to HIU? Heather, do you want to start?
So, like many people, the pandemic upended my life in ways that were both challenging and fruitful and surprising. And one of those surprises is that I was living in Brooklyn and had applied to go to divinity school in New York. And I ended up relocating to be closer to family who live in southern Vermont. So now I live in Putney, Vermont. And that meant I had to find a different way to do my graduate work that I was hoping to do. And I totally, through word of mouth, heard about Hartford International, and I knew, even as I was applying to MDiv programs, that my goal was chaplaincy. I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And so to discover the Master of Arts in Chaplaincy program that had been announced, I think, two or 3 months before I applied, was just thrilling, because I was pretty clear that chaplaincy was where I was headed, and I loved that there was a more pre-professional focus in this program. I'm Jewish, but I grew up in an interreligious family, and so studying in an interreligious context was really important for me. And I also am a mother of 2 kids who are 5 and 8, and I live about an hour and a half from Hartford. So there was also a kind of logistical flexibility to the program that made it possible for me as a parent to study and to really engage deeply in a way that would still work with the other existing parameters in my life.
Lauren.
Yeah, oh man, okay. So I had become aware of HIU when, right around like 2015, when Center DC was getting started. I'm very excited to tell this story. One of our founding folks who helped to start Center DC is Maggie Siddiqui, who's also a graduate from here. And I remember doing a program, we used to just gather people at the Islamic Heritage Museum. Sheikh Suhaib Webb would be there to like provide the content. I'd be there to help massage and like get the relationship interaction piece going. And I remember one of our first events, Suhaib had called Maggie to the front to close out with dua, to like lead supplication and prayer. And it was the first time that I'd ever seen a Muslim woman lead prayer in front of anybody, like in a public way. And I remember just being in awe, and I talked to her about it afterwards. I was like, tell me all about it. Like, you went to a seminary as a Muslim, like, what does that even mean? And then I found out about like Dr. Nisa and Dr. Joshua, who also were in the area doing chaplaincy related things. And when I found out about their transit of driving 6 hours, I was like, this is impossible for my life. Like, I work full time, like, and I run an organization full time, and I'm married full time. There's just no way I'm gonna be able to do that. And it was actually at a Center, fast forward to 2019, and I was facilitating a Center DC event, and another Hartford person was there who, Shazana had brought a reverend with her to a Center DC event, and afterwards she comes up to me and she goes, Lauren, I don't think you've ever met me before, but you're a chaplain and you don't know it yet. And I was like, there were too many intersections, and I was like, what in the world is going on with this? I need to maybe I'll just call up to the university and do an informational interview. And I got a call with Dr. Timur, and he was like, so classes start in 2 weeks. What do we need to do to get you enrolled in your first class? And that was it. I was here. Yeah.
So if you read my bio, you'll see that I was in a very different world for a long time. Having grown up as immigrants' daughters, economic pursuits and academic achievement was foremost in my ethos. And so having been a business school professor on the academic track, my heart was seeking, and then I left to be a corporate exec and lead tech, media, and telecom for a consulting firm. And even then, I was still seeking, and it took an accident which put me I was bedridden to really start seeking and start following this pursuit. 2 years later, I didn't even know the word chaplain. A year later, I was doing a diversity, equity, inclusion workshop at MIT, and the university chaplain at the time asked me about chaplaincy, and I didn't even know the word, but felt the call. And so I started at MIT as an intern chaplain, and then found my way to Tufts, where I am now, but not yet a full chaplain. The theological education was lacking, and I wanted to find a space that wouldn't traumatize me. Growing up in Kansas and being taught about myself and my tradition literally made me, I never slept in classes. I was very studious. I have a PhD, but I could not take it, and my body would shut down. And I didn't want to incur that purposefully, like sign up to do that day in and day out. And through the graces of the universe, I met Dr. Mosher, and was so glad to find my postdoc, my last year under her care and supervision, and I just got promoted to Hindu chaplain.
Congratulations. Oh, yeah. Hello, assalamu alaikum, everybody. Peace be with you. A little closer. Is that good? All right. I know it was COVID safe to put, but it's all good. So, what brought me to Hayu, I think kind of like Jay, I took a scenic route to get to Hayu. I'm based out of Austin, Texas, and I had the privilege of being quite involved at the time in undergrad with the MSA, and became naturally very confused about what I wanted to do as I got closer and closer towards graduation. And there was a very fortunate moment that I had where we had Imam Khalid Latif, who was at, I believe, had come from the Hartford program or was at Hartford, and this person who's a Muslim chaplain, is just there, and the way he was able to connect with each of us, the way he was able to talk to us about the faith, it just piqued my interest. And so I talked to him a little bit afterwards about, well, how do you even begin this journey? What does it look like? And he had just simply said, Hartford. That's all he said. He was like, check Hartford out. He's like, Hartford. He was like, that's a good starting point. And it was. And after I graduated, that was the intention, was to come to Hartford, was to do Islamic chaplaincy and to go in this space. However, due to some family and financial reasons, that was becoming a little bit more difficult to occur. So in that long scenic route, I ended up going to the seminary right across the street where I currently work. So I was able to go to the seminary at Austin Seminary and do my MDiv there, but consistently, you would see my search history in my browser is always looking at Hartford stuff. So there's a dual allegiance that was there. And finally, when I graduated from the seminary, coming from an MDiv program that was largely within the Christian Presbyterian tradition, where I definitely found my heart there, but I found my soul very much in Hartford when I graduated in COVID, of all places, and was kind of shown how accessible the program here had become. And so it was just very fortunate that I came into Hartford at the time that I did in 2020 with Dr. Ansari's Islamic Pastoral Theology class and a biography on the Prophet ﷺ. And I was like, I'm just going to audit this. You know what? I was like, I already paid a lot of money for, this MDiv and other stuff. I'm just going to audit it. It's going to be a fly on the wall. And maybe within like 2 hours after the class finished, I went and I signed up and I told Dr. Ansari, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be in this. And it just kind of went from there. And it's kind of been like that throughout, but it's now hard to leave. So I'm going to have to think about how people leave exactly or tie the knot up, because it's been just such a privilege to be able to be alongside you all in this journey and coming to Hayu with this. So
I'm wondering, all my students or are about to become, we have the first class together with a couple of them. A couple of them are veterans of Lucinda. At any rate, talk a little bit about what it's been like learning to be a chaplain via Zoom. Who'd like to start? Okay, Preeta.
So I have to preface this by saying my first year as a Hindu advisor / chaplain was in COVID. So it is very appropriate and necessary, in particular providing care for many people in these times. And the model that Hayu has set up is such a beautiful example. So I learned from the model, as well as learning in the model of caregiving, that we were able to speak at such depth about really engaging and necessary topics across spans of space, time. It was night and day sometimes when we were speaking, and to be able to do that in these ways, on topics in each of these classes was so important for me.
So, for me, again, with that idea of like this 6-hour commute once a week, it was literally like it wasn't even an option. So being able to do this program on Zoom essentially is the reason why I'm able to do any of the things that have like dramatically shaped my life and direction over the last couple of years. It's funny because during the pandemic, actually, in 2019, I started the program because I was like, my community really, one, because all of the signs, right? Allah was just like here. But the community was really, we were doing this great relationship building in person, and people are getting deep with each other, and they're doing exploration in groups, but then they're like in crisis, right? Because we've now unearthed, opened the can, all the things are coming out. And I knew that chaplaincy was part of the answer to this. And when the pandemic had hit, this was like a couple of years in my slow course, like one class per semester, I had a conversation with Dr. Bilal, who's like, you need to start this now, right? Like right now, you have to start. And I was like, I haven't done CPE, I'm just brand new, I don't know what I'm doing. And because of Zoom, I was able to have the mentorship needed to literally start a brand new community-based chaplaincy program with Dr. Bilal's support. He met with me like once every other week, was like available on call, participated in our online programming to like help hold space for community who was like going through a lot of really difficult stuff, like everyone was during the pandemic. And so I also had the opportunity to reflect about, because of the coursework that I was doing and the flexibility of my professors, shout out to Dr. Keys, I was able to focus and reflect on what it meant to do online care when so much of the work that I do is facilitating people's connection in person. And this was a pushback. I remember we would go back and forth. I'm like, we're really doing magical things online. And Dr. Bilal was like, we're a foot-to-foot community. Like, that's how we do. We snuggle in for prayer, we're with each other, and there's something about that connection. So although being back in person has kind of like, I know you're right, but online, there are definitely, I think, taking classes at HiU online and then being encouraged and supported in doing online chaplaincy for a community-based group really sort of has just totally rocked my world and expanded what I thought was possible to do.
I think first and foremost, I just want to express my gratitude for the fact that I was able to study safely. And that is like such an extraordinary privilege, right, in this time. I started here at HIU last fall. And so, amidst the pandemic, and I had intended to matriculate the year prior, but had ended up deciding to defer my admission in New York because I knew, or I had the sense that I was not going to have childcare that was going to allow me to pursue my studies, and that was true. My kids were in school for 2 days a week, which is better than a lot of people had last year. So, but that meant that I was for the first time in my adult life a stay-at-home mom last year. The year prior to that, and being able to resume this dream that I had been harboring for several years. And being able to do it, even though I had moved to rural Vermont, was just extraordinary. And it gave me community, it gave me inspiration, it gave me a sense of purpose in a difficult time. And so, for me, the journey was so, it was just huge to be able to begin, right? And to begin even with, everything that we all felt that we had lost. So with all of the limitations of learning on Zoom, and I taught remotely in the spring of 2020, and I can tell you it felt like putting up a tent and calling it school, right? It was not school. School is a foot-to-foot business. But there is magic in all of this, nonetheless, and I'm here for it.
Send the mic down to you.
Thank y'all. I would say that for me, coming into the program, I was coming from a very embodied program. I just finished CPE, and the community at Austin and pastoral care and chaplaincy as it was taught was very embodied and very much in person. I couldn't picture it being anything else. So, coming out of CP, I was like, this is what chaplaincy is. These are those corrosive, awkward spaces, but I've got to have someone who hates discomfort. Like, I'm probably in the wrong profession, but like someone who hates that, who's challenged to be that this is a space that you got to get comfortable with. And lo and behold, the divine plan has another thing, and we all go completely virtual into the Zoom space. And so what I found it to be like to be a chaplain on Zoom, kind of as Jay had mentioned earlier, being able to communicate and touch base with folks who previously weren't able to come to those spaces, who were restricted to those spaces. And I found that a lot of my learning that I was doing at that time was with people who were facing many of the same struggles as I was as a chaplain, trying to find my kind of space, where would I kind of connect with different people. And I was in class with people for whom this was a new reality as well. It was, how do we learn something that was previously very much embodied? How do we go through this challenge? How do we relate this back to our communities? And having those conversation partners that we were kind of in the throes of COVID inventing the road as we're walking on it. And so it was helpful to have people alongside who are also wondering, how do we keep inventing this, or how do we keep going, rather than just feeling like the odd one out. So it was very helpful to have that. And carrying over now, since though the pandemic is still going on, coming into a more embodied space, yet still having those skills in a sense. How do we connect to people who aren't able to reach us, who aren't able to come to us? So so much of the work that our community does is also still online, because we have people who are elderly, who have restricted access, who are mothers who are staying at home, and so being able to reach them, but also just seeing that as soon as we created this space, that people from across the country would reach out and be like, hey, I saw that you're a Muslim chaplain or something, I would just like to talk to you about something. And just how that space has become so accessible for anybody, whether from one corner of the country to another, has allowed that. And so what it's like to be a chaplain, it's just as diverse as being in person, but it's also been very rewarding to have it in both spaces.
Yeah, I've been teaching online exclusively since the fall of 2016, and people ask me all the time, or say to me, well, you can't possibly achieve any depth when you're in an online class, can you? And I think you're hearing here that we get an incredible amount of depth in our online classes, even the ones that are asynchronous, where talking to each other in real time out loud is not what we do the most of. So it's really interesting to hear this reflection. As you think about how our program works, where you are in it, I've got a sort of a dual question for you. What aspect of HIU's chaplaincy program has been most important to you so far? And perhaps in talking about that, you could talk about a transformative experience you've had. Who'd like to take that one first? Okay, Preeta.
I'll start. I want to reference back to Dr. Madsen's question of an image of chaplaincy. And developing that image for me has been witness tree. I come from a faith following that's very eco-spiritual. And the natural environment is very, very important to me. And so developing that, my plan of care, or who I am as a chaplain, or what that image is, was transformative. Because I can't take on the pastoral care model. It doesn't fit. And having that experience of finding my own voice and being able to explain it and talk about it has helped me show up authentically, yet in ways that are available to and accessible to all. So that was my transformational moment. And was there a second part to that?
Well, yeah. So what's important about the program to you, the way it is structured, and anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, the structure and why it's so important is that theological or the structural aspect. So also referring back to Dr. Madsen's comments, the creativity and innovation in Islam, it's the opposite in Hinduism. It's very creative and innovative. We need structure. And so it was that other way of like finding the structure and the frameworks and finding the terms and the ways of approaching care and caregiving. So I think it was that dialogue. So thank you.
Okay, I hope it's all right if I talk about two things. One moment, which was my first face-to-face class last fall, I was in Reverend Donna Schapper's Death and Dying class. It's an intensive, it meets one day a month, and I sat in this room and with Christine and Karen and Denise, my fabulous classmates in the back, and the first thing she asked us, she just said, share an experience of grief. And I think it took us 2 hours to get through the entire class. But it was so extraordinary to sit in a room at this moment in time, and to just be present for one another and for each other's stories. It was an extraordinary moment, I think, of healing and of vulnerability. And Christine sat next to me while I wept, and then she told a really amazing joke right afterwards, and it was great. And that was the beginning of a cohort of friends who have become really colleagues, partners in study and in the growth that we're all experiencing in this program, and that has transformed my life. I mean, it's a gift to make friends in the middle of your life. Like, I'm 40 and it's been COVID. So, it's not been like the most social time. And here I have discovered these really heart deep friendships. So that has been transformative. On the other side, I think something that has been amazing about the MAC program is that you have a real range of experience in the student body. So I am studying with unbelievable people who are out in the world doing incredible work, who have extraordinary sort of bench of experiences that they bring to the class. And then there are folks like me, we called ourselves the baby chaplains, who are career changers, and who, for some of us, this is our first step, right, into this career path. And I have found just incredible mentors, Sidra in Phoenix, Shazana in Virginia, Kwabe in Texas. I mean, these are extraordinary women who are doing extraordinary work, and to be the beneficiary of their knowledge and wisdom is just such a gift.
I think, I'll start off this kind of with my inherent bias. So when I found this program and I was like, I'm doing this, a lot of it was because it's like, there's a chaplaincy program that's Islamic. Like, what is this? This is very interesting, and it's got this legacy of being the oldest, the most reputable, all of these teachers and all of these great chaplains have come through this program. I want to be a part of that trajectory. And I remember getting here and realizing my professors for all of my early class, basically all of my electives, I think, were all Muslim instructors. Whether they were Dr. Bilal teaching the prophetic biography class or the Muslim pastoral theology class, or if it was Dr. Human Kashavarzi who's teaching counseling and trauma from a Muslim perspective. All of his resources and references, he even says at the beginning of the class, he's like, I went through my PhD program studying from other people's perspectives, and now I'm able to present the wealth of resources, the richness of the Islamic tradition with this intersection. So for me, knowing that I wanted to work in a community setting with Muslims, this was spot on, and I was like, I'm doing this. I think when it comes to the transformation part for me, there's a future transformation that is coming, meaning because I'm in the MAC program, I'm now taking all of my core classes sort of back to back to back after having done community chaplaincy, having done a unit of CPE. Now I'm getting to the core of what is chaplaincy, what's the legacy, what are the different models and methods, what are the ethics and being able to get the interfaith lens blended in now that I've sort of rooted myself in practice, which I'm very excited about the transformation that's happening there. But I think almost all of my transformative moments that come to mind, I'm not gonna cry, it has to do with being affirmed. The fact that Dr. Bilal casually mentions me as a trailblazer. And it's not just Dr. Bilal. It's the scholarly practitioner that is Dr. Bilal, who believed in me enough to do something completely outside of my practice, but said, you've got this, and you have the internal skill sets, and your tradition that you're standing on has the internal resources, and you're able to do this because of your tradition. You're strengthened by it, and it's built into the curriculum that I'm learning. That's just priceless. You can't get that anywhere. And so I think that piece for me of having a mentor that believes in you, and it also shows up in other faculty members who during the pandemic, like allowed me to completely change my final paper so that I could, in Dr. Key's class, submit my final paper ended up getting submitted to the Herma Respect Conference, and I got to present there. Or Dr. Sohail Lair, who then allowed me again to adjust my paper so that I could spend time getting ready to write the chapter in the book Mantle of Mercy. Like all the professors were just really, really supportive and are like believing in me and saying like, you can control this education in the way that's gonna work best for you, and you can make this program what you need, and we're here to support you and help you make that happen. Those things feel transformative because it then allows me to go back into the community and know I've got backing from a legacy of an institution that says I can do this, and that means a lot.
Thank you, Lauren. I would say that for me, first off, with the aspect that's been most important, that you've heard it better than I can say up here, just with respect to not just the diversity of the material that is incorporated within the program, but the voices, the people that are intentionally a part of that structure, that your faculty, the students that are there, these are diverse perspectives challenging you and helping you grow along the way. I feel like for me, that definitely was something that I was really looking for, really hungry for, and was really given in a positive way. And so just to have that intentionally a part and parcel every step of the way, so you don't really feel like you're siloed off. You feel very much connected in a way. And I would say the transformative experience that comes about, going to Dr. Mattson's point about creativity and imagination. I was coming from a place in Austin that I was the only Muslim student at a Presbyterian seminary, and I had this assumption that my perspective wouldn't be welcome. And the first paper I submitted was on, the confessions of faith, and I wrote it exactly to a Christian perspective, and I received it back completely red marked, and they say, "We want to know your perspective. You're not Presbyterian. Don't act like it." they're like, "You've got something more spicier to offer. Like, give it up." And so that was the perspective I was coming for, was that I would be, I was invited into that space, but I was challenged because I had to go to in an island to try to present, what does my faith say about this? What does Islam have to offer about certain areas that we're talking about? And as I had cited Dr. Ansari's class, to come into a space where we were using a model that's traditionally been seen within the Christian setting of pastoral care, of shepherding. I think we used the book of Images of Pastoral Care, which I have on my bookshelf and I consistently reference, but to see it, to have that slight push that says, now look at this from the prophetic biography of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, to invite that space, not just to where I'm challenged to do on my own, but intentionally a part of that. How do we analyze this and have a creative discussion around it? So I would say it was transformative for me in that much of the ingredients were there, but Dr. Bilal and Hartford really provided the sauce and started to cook it to where it's been something that has been hard to leave in that way, to continue to be transformed. And I would say that that's been the other aspect of the transformative experience, is that it continues to happen. Each and every class that is being taken, there's always something that's being offered. And so I would say my entire experience so far has been transformative.
Thank you. When we restructured the Master of Arts, or restructured in many ways as a school, and out of that came the Master of Arts in Chaplaincy program, one of the things that we were extremely intentional about was to foreground the common qualifications and competencies that are agreed upon by many, many organizations around the country. And so any of you who have any familiarity at all with chaplaincy will know that there are at least 29 competencies that people are concerned that you have if you want to achieve board certification, especially as a hospital chaplain. So that's underpinning our entire curriculum, and I just am curious, how is this underpinning, how is this emphasis on the common qualifications and competencies helpful to you, and to what extent is it a pain in the neck? Surely one of you has something to say.
I have a thought. I mean, I think part of me, especially like being the fact that there aren't I don't have a ton of peers that are like, there's some, alhamdulillah, but not a ton of peers that are like Muslim women running a Muslim organization. A lot of me seeking this degree and like seeking this track, this trajectory is like, I want to feel like I have a mastery of something, and being able to come forward and say, I have this mastery, I'm qualified. Like being confident, that piece Dr. Matson mentioned, like I want to be confident in this. And having those criteria gives me something to strive for that's concrete and tangible. And I could go through each one individually and be like, where am I at with this one? What about this? Where's the work live? Like, and being able to target where the work lives, that's a whole skill set in and of itself that without the proper guidance, it's hard to do. So I really appreciate it. And I think maybe it's actually, I don't know if it's jaded me or like informed me in some kind of sneaky way. Like as a community chaplain that doesn't intend, I love hospitals, but I don't intend on working in a hospital. We'll see what happens. I've started to love it. CPE is weird like that. But as somebody who intends to work in a community setting, I want to go get board certified. Like it should be something, like there should be something that, like nobody's asking me to do that. That's not something anybody needs from me, or nobody's expecting me to do it. But because I feel like we've been drilled to say, these are the things, I want somebody to test me and be like, yeah, she can do it. Like I want that because I'm working so hard for it. So it's like, it'd be nice to be able to say, yeah, check. So I like it, I'm for it. It's working.
You know, I think as a longtime educator, I think there is a lot of value in naming your learning outcomes, right? And in going through the process of naming your goals. I think it's really important on an institutional level. I think it's really important on an individual level as a teacher. But I also know, both as a teacher and a student, that what we're up to here is beyond any list, right? It's beyond any particular assessment method. That we bring our whole selves into chaplaincy, that our whole selves grow and evolve. It's not like, okay, you've done your degree, like check. Off you go, you know, that we continue to learn and grow in this work, and that is a much more organic process than anything that can be captured by a checklist. So I think I approach any kind of assessment like that with a degree of skepticism, but I also think that in a way there's it gives you something you can build on too. Like you can look at some of these competencies and say, oh, okay, maybe they phrase it this way, but in my deepest self, in the integrity of what I know and I experience, maybe I would actually describe it in this other way. And so it gives you something to kind of like refine your understanding against. And maybe that's the way that I'm approaching it in my work.
Sorry, it feels kind of weird going out of order, but I'm not so used to the other order. I would say that among the other things that we've kind of talked about, how many folks here have been asked when we've talked about going into chaplaincy, that we're studying chaplaincy or we are chaplains, how many folks have been asked, so what even is chaplaincy? And how many of us have responded differently to the question many different times as much as it's asked? So I feel that one big thing that at least having the qualifications and competencies, not as a restrictor in any sort, but as a foundational framework, at least helps us not just professionalize what's at the present maybe seem as a kind of ambiguous space, especially as we're occupying different sectors of life, from healthcare to military to hospital to community. I feel that it helps provide that framework, but still allows for that creativity. But you have something that you fall back on. You have some structure that's there, and in the whole scheme of things, as nascent as chaplaincy in and of itself may be, I feel that this is something that is really, really it's something that is model, and that Hartford is doing with respect to basing a program off of these competencies, basing these programs off these qualifications, and underpinning that, as opposed to saying that, oh, you need to get to this level, you need to do that, and that's kind of the ceiling. It allows it flips it on its head by allowing, it says that these are what we're going to be basing the program off of, and let's see how you grow from there. And I feel that in the long term, hopefully, it allows us to come back to this space in a year, in however long we do, and talk about to not just the people on the outside, but to each other, and have a common understanding of chaplaincy, understanding that it is a diverse profession, but we have very similar roots that we're coming from. We have very similar foundations and frameworks. And so, yeah, just echoing a lot of what was said here. I'm a big fan of the learning outcomes as well, so it's always helpful to know, like, oh, I think I'll learn this afterwards, but I find I learn very different things later, but to know that that's the foundation that's going, and then giving that room for growth to go from there.
So I'll preface my answer in a fundamental belief that I believe each of us comes with a gift to give and a lesson to learn. And so I've been fortunate to know that that has been the word bridging for me. And so what does it mean to bridge is there's one very strong foundation on one side, and there's one very strong foundation on the other, and it's creating that path between these foundations. And so the core competencies are a very strong foundation on one side. And it is, again, as all my colleagues have mentioned, very good to measure too. I think the opportunity is how to allow them to be more accessible to those who have not had access to the kind of spiritual care that our siblings have had, where these problems are so persistent and actually increasing. That has not had this care and has not had this qualified care, even though the field of chaplaincy has been long. And so that's, I think, my opportunity.
Thank you. So I'm wondering, as we kind of wrap up the present part and think about the future, what is something that HIU is doing presently in our chaplaincy program that you fervently hope we will keep doing? You know, what are we getting right and you really don't want us to mess with?
Oh, I'm going. Bismillah. So it definitely, I think, is the, of course, the mentorship. That's something that, like, I think having the professionals who have skill sets that relate to students' interests and needs and experiences, be able to, like, walk with them and, like, chaplain the chaplains along the way is really important. So I hope to see that still happen. I also, again, like, I'm really excited about the program expanding to be like interfaith and to train chaplains from other faith traditions beyond just Muslim chaplains in an explicit way, because I think there's going to be so much learning that I'm going to get out of doing the core classes again with peers who are working perhaps even in community settings, but a totally different tradition. The insight I'm going to be able to gain, the conversations we're going to have, the support that I know is there, I'll be able to tap into that because of the design that's new, that I'm going to be able to really dig into. So that's something I'm really looking forward to and hope that that continues to grow and expand. Oh, summer classes, right? Like the summer sessions. I think I was having some FOMO when they're all up in this panel talking about the past and how they used to go hiking and like all the learning that happened outside of the classroom. And I'm just like, many of my classmates I've really only seen, like, this is a byproduct of Zoom stuff, where like I've only seen many of my classmates in text chains, and then I see their face, their photo that you ask us to post, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there you are. Or then I see them in person, I'm like, oh my gosh, there you are. I saw you on Zoom. We've taken like 4 classes together, and I've never seen your face or heard your voice. And so being able to like be together with people, both like, I think the summer classes, the intensives, the winter intensives give us the opportunity to come out here. This maybe I'm jumping ahead, is like a retreat, some opportunity to gather to just be in relationship with each other and connect with the student body so that I can feel like I'm leaving with those relationships. That's something that I'm hoping, I feel like perhaps happened in the past. And I'm hoping that that also continues, that doesn't get left just because COVID made things difficult. Like, I want to see that come back. So I can also get some of those throwback friend for life vibes from some of my classmates also.
Just to follow up with that, I would say that in the intentional diversity of the coursework is kind of a given, that is something that is very novel, that whether equivalent of an MDiv or pastoral care or chaplaincy taught at many other institutions is oftentimes from a singular lens. And so to have something very unique and intentional at Hartford where it's from an intersection of perspectives, and especially from faith perspectives, that will be reflected in the workspace, but oftentimes in the classroom settings in different spaces doesn't get touched upon, maybe reference here and there, but to have that a part and parcel to where it's reflective in a way that we have a panel here of folks of different faith, but being able to do this in the world outside, but this is not different from what is reflected out there. Oftentimes it's a singular panel talking about the issues out there, and I feel that there is that connection that takes place as well. The aspect that Lauren talked about, the mentorship, the faculty who care. It's not just a class. It's not just about the end of the year surveys or about the grades that are there. It's about those relationships. And I think, as Dr. Mattson had mentioned, that's fundamental to chaplaincy is relationship building, and to have faculty that are not just privy to that, but that's their passion as well. It's not just about the academic aspect. It's about forming leaders, forming people, forming servants, forming caregivers for other people, and so chaplaining those chaplains. I think that we had held at what Hartford has presently done to keep doing, and I would just also call back to the things that Hartford has done in the past as well, that those are things that because of our current modality doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have to continue to be done, but to reach back as well in there. And I think we'll probably go a little bit more into the future, so I'll hold my thoughts at that.
Shout out to Dr. Mosher. I think what is amazing is focusing on the verbs rather than the nouns. Sanskrit and many indigenous languages are verb related. You know everything from the verb. Unfortunately, English is very noun specific. What are you now? It's a noun, not an ing. I am becoming a chaplain. And that recognition, which we've heard across the panel of chaplains or chaplaincy in the verbs. And I hope that continues as chaplaincy continues to evolve.
A lot of the things that I was going to say have already been said, but I think for me, in some ways, the opportunity to be present in spaces where people who are not in my religious tradition are kind of hashing it out together has been really extraordinary. Just as an example, I took a summer intensive with AJ Levine in June, and the majority of the folks in that class were Christian clergy or very involved Christian lay people, and to really hear a beautiful, rich, intense debate unfold, and to be able to take that in and participate and be immersed in that, in this kind of wonderful debate that was unfolding both in real time and with a sacred text and through Christian history, it's just extraordinary. I mean, today, right, to be immersed in this discourse about Islamic chaplaincy as a Jewish woman, I just think there aren't that many places in the world where this happens. And I am just so glad to be here, and to have the opportunity to kind of to sort of soak in it, right? To really take it in.
So, what are your recommendations for the future of chaplaincy education at HIU? What are we not doing now that you hope we will do?
This education needs to be everywhere, not just in spiritually, philosophically inclined, chaplaincy inclined institutions, but everywhere. And I say this with understanding that I feel secularity is a false dichotomy. Everything is some version of spiritual or religious, or and so, you know, coming from business school and you know, corporate life, I was seeking that spirituality and ability to chaplain in it, and this education would change so many people's lives. The further it expands the opportunities we've just talked about, and just think about it. Imagine that world where lawyers, doctors, we spoke about, where business people all had access, and it was something that we could all engage in.
Other recommendations?
We're playing like ping pong already.
Yeah, this is microphone ping pong. Recommendations for HIUs and the future of chaplaincy education here.
So I want to address two things that I think institutionally are both opportunities and challenges, right? And one is that this program has this incredible grounding, right, in the Christian tradition that has long been at the seminary, and in Islamic chaplaincy that was really at the heart of the founding of the program. But now you've got students who enrolling in increasing numbers who are Hindu and who are Jewish and who are Buddhist and who are spiritual atheists, right? You've got people coming from a lot of different backgrounds into the chaplaincy program, and I think the question of how to evolve your bench of professionals who can answer to those needs, how to evolve your course offerings to ensure that that you are ahead of and not kind of following your enrollment. I think that's a challenge, and I don't envy anyone who is involved in trying to sort out how to do that, because it's a lot to answer to. It's a big vision and a big mission, and a small school. So that's a challenge. I think also thinking about the sort of testimony that we've heard today about both the incredible importance of access, right, and what Zoom, I mean, I'm a case in point here, what Zoom makes possible, but also how critical it is to get people in rooms with each other, right, to really be in each other's presence, and how deeply important that is to the kind of relationship building that I think is at the heart of this work and at the heart of building a professional network once we leave this place. I would love to see an in-person orientation that's really built around this sense of creating cohorts. I came upon mine kind of by chance, right? Because I happened to enroll in this intensive face-to-face class that allowed for that level of engagement. But I hope that's an opportunity that is available to every HIU student. And so I think figuring out how the school can continue to expand everywhere, but also be here together is a place where I would like to kind of see the institution pushed a little bit.
I have two class requests. One is I really want to see this history of Islamic chaplaincy in the United States class happen. Shout out Jay, I'm going to need to see this class taught. I think that it'll just give so much breadth of context to what the options are, what the differences are, and give students a chance to like really dig in, who are both in the practice, but also needing to know the history to make sure that your practice is connected. So I'd like to see that happen. And I also really want to see a community chaplaincy course. I want to be in class with other people that are doing the type of work that I'm doing, and I want to be with other professionals that, like, I want to be taught by professionals who've done this before. There's no way, there's no possible way I could be the trailblazer for real. Like, I get that there's parts of what I'm doing that are unique and perhaps different, but like, I'm really craving and longing for like that also connection to history from whatever background and tradition has the best. I'd like that. The other thing that I feel like I want to mention, Jay really struck a chord when she had mentioned the statistic of the tuition doubling. And as someone who basically has a startup organization, I take a salary from a startup community that I'm basically the biggest expense that they have. In order for me to finish my program, I've had to go to my board and say, hey, I need you guys to fund the rest of my studies. Like, I'm working here and I have to finish. I still have I still got a lot of ways to go. And so I really wish that there were more scholarship opportunities for students who are not just doing full-time programs, who have like the long run trajectory of one class a semester, that comes from the university, whether it's like supported by alumni or otherwise. Like, this university has a tremendous network of people, and so I'd really, and possibility to partner with other people who do have funds to help make that happen. And so that ease would not only support like me, but other students like me who are prevented from taking all the courses that they want to take, or exploring all the electives that they like to explore, or even starting the program because of finances.
Dang, Lauren, I didn't know you can see my paper from there. It's exactly what I was going to say. No, I'm just playing. No, it's all good. It's all good. I would really echo that, making the programs, especially with the chaplaincy education, financially accessible. As I mentioned, when I was looking at programs, Hartford was at, bar none at the top, but because of financial constraint, I was not able to attend. And all praise is due to God. The path was made easier, and through that scenic route through Austin. But that was a big thing, and it's still a current thing. As I am, in the program now, and continue to discern how many classes can I take, how can I balance this out. As a working professional, it's difficult for me to take on a full load. And so for a student coming fresh out of undergrad, how do I make this education more accessible? Going off of Heather's point as well, having some element of that in-person connection as well, whether it's like a limited intensive or an orientation. I think it's been tremendous in the privilege that I've had to be able to come at a time and in a place and in a class where I was immediately shepherded into by Dr. Bilal to the Association of Muslim Chaplains, for better or for worse, so Jay may know. But it literally was the perfect segue for me in a space where I was the only Muslim chaplain in Central Texas, and probably still am to a current extent, but to be connected to a network of people that I became so connected with that when I met a good amount of them on March of this past year, I was like, I've known y'all forever. Like, it felt like that. But just to have something limited in that aspect would be tremendous. And the last thing I would just say is having, as was said earlier, some more outward exposure. I think that because of just the nature of where we are in a society now, reaching people, it may not be viable to have folks take a whole program or to do an entire program, but to be able to offer some kinds of intensives or some kinds of discovery weekends to Hartford or Hartford's chaplaincy education program, so that these things are known by more people, and this kind of then spills over into building that network, making it more accessible when you have more and more people have the buy-in to it. So I think Hartford really has a lot to offer that a lot of people have seen, thus the name International as well incorporated, but I think that that's just scratching the surface. I feel that there's even more folks that can benefit from this, even if it's not by the full-on program, but just being exposed to what we all have to offer here.
So as we come close to the end of this panel discussion, I'm curious, what have you learned about chaplaincy per se that you had never thought of before? What was an aha moment for you about the profession? And I hope that has some relation to the other part of my question, which is, what are your hopes for your own career? Where do you foresee your career taking you over the next few years? Or put another way, what other directions for exploring this diverse and sometimes slippery profession would you like to be able to have the opportunity to sample?
I think about this question a lot. Thank you. So I've just arrived at Hindu chaplaincy, and I'm thinking, how can this path be made wider? The room is very diverse, but how do people get here? Where are the signposts? How do I change the language? How do I build, that directionality to get here? For those who don't even know the word chaplain, as I didn't 3.5 years ago. And then the other is there are so many who are spiritual but not religious, or nuns, or seeking, and eco-spiritual. Like they go out and I was one of them, and just commune with nature, and that's where they seek. So how does the language, the structures that are so helpful, how does that sometimes create a barrier that we can ease? Again, maybe that's path building, but also maybe it's a posture that we develop. So that's my goals. And the last thing I'll say is, as I'm looking into the future for myself and for Hindu chaplaincy, I really have leaned and learned a lot from my siblings of other traditions. So the North American Hindu Chaplains Association was created in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, and we're having our first in-person meeting at Tufts in this November. And so I've learned so much from all the work that's been present in this room. So thank you.
I think when I started the program, I thought I was going to come in and learn all the answers, right? I was going to know all the things. I was going to be a chaplain. I was going to be able to go and do the chaplain thing when people ask you to chaplain. I was going to be like, I'm a chaplain. Let me show up in chaplain. I'm going to have the answers. I'm going to know. And mid-pandemic, after, this is before CPE, before doing my own field study, Dr. Bilal has me starting a community chaplaincy-based program and managing another high U students field ed all together at the same time. I'm getting feedback on my very first verbatim, and which I kind of fumbled pretty miserably, actually, in hindsight. I thought I did really well. But essentially what I landed, which is the biggest lesson that also got me through doing CPE as the only Muslim CPE student in a hospital serving barely any Muslims, what got me through that, and I feel one of the biggest learnings that also is showing up in classes, and I've been able to own a little bit more as I've gone through the coursework, is that God's the one doing the work, and that I just get to be there to hold the hand, to do the listening. There's no doing that I need to do other than show up. And that God is working, and when you're open to it and you're tuned in, sometimes you get to witness God working. And that's really what it's about. And that all of the learning that we're doing here is supporting our confidence, our creativity, our ability, and foundational knowledge that helps us do that better. But that feels for me the biggest takeaway that feels really concrete, that just keeps showing up, and I'm really grateful for that. I think my hope, you mentioned hope for career. I think I'm gonna solidify this. I think I wanna get board certified. I think that's something I'd like to do. I'd like to see more community chaplains in Muslim spaces kind of take that route. Or if it doesn't end up working, carving out another way to pursue some kind of standardized, this is what we have to offer and what's happening in the field of community chaplaincy. I'd like to see that happen. And I want the community to know that they should expect that level of service and quality from the caregivers.
So I would just say that currently in Austin, Texas, we're known for many things: bad politics, barbecue, but not really for our Muslim chaplains or chaplaincy in general. Hopefully that's something we can change. But currently in Austin, because of a Hartford field education unit that was at a community organization that I served at, because of just having that drop, just put into that community, we then got reached out to by a local prison. We got reached out to by a university in our way that says, hey, we didn't know that there's a Muslim chaplain around. Could you help serve these different areas, or just help us out, with respect to providing care for these folks? And so, currently in that setting, in serving in a community corrections and then in a educational role, I would echo what I've heard, especially from the previous panel, of how invaluable it is to have that support, to have just connection to peers. Jay mentioned Shura, just to have that consultation, to have mentorship, to have people that are there, maybe not in that specific space. Like I said, I'm kind of on an island with Austin, but I really don't feel disconnected from the field of Islamic chaplaincy or from my Muslim chaplain siblings or other chaplain siblings that are there. I feel like even the one benefit of COVID has been I can easily connect to people just readily off the bat and feel like I've known them for a while. What I would also think about is that a kind of hope in the future, not just for myself in that career, but in the sense of Islamic chaplaincy is, I feel like a lot of times chaplaincy education comes from a lens of how can we fit this person into an existing system of chaplaincy, that there's a university setting that needs a chaplain, there's a hospital that needs a chaplain, there's somebody that needs a chaplain, but I think that a lot of times we find ourselves in these different spaces saying that, wouldn't a chaplain be like great here? How can we be trained to create chaplaincy within different communities, different institutions, different organizations, and so challenging myself in that I happened to come along and by the grace of God that these other institutions identified that, oh, hey, we have a group of Muslim prisoners that pray and they could be using some help. We have a group of MSA students that would be benefiting from some help here. Maybe we can just put someone there. But how can I, in my space, help to intentionally create a not just organization, but a path, a way alongside the network that has already been here to allow that path to be traversed by other people, so that I'm not just the Central Texas chaplain, that if I die tomorrow, that whole void is, just goes belly up. But how can we create something that continues? And I think that from the Islamic perspective, that's tradition. That's something we pass along, and how can we incorporate that? So my hope is that this isn't just something that comes to me, I inherit it, and then I go to the grave with it, but it's something that can be shared and continually benefit other people, and hopeful for the education as well in that space. The last thing I'll just say is, on that note of really reinforcing that invaluable support because as someone who works actively with pastors and rabbis and imams in my community, seeing how often pastoral and spiritual burnout is, that people who are in their congregations, in their spaces, get burned out when they don't have that kind of support. And I've seen it just happen so often. And so just to have people, when I felt burnt out, I've had that support that I know I can go to people and talk to them, and it just helps me keep going. So to uplift that regardless of where we are there.
Thank you, because you gave me the perfect segue. It's so good. So, I think when people ask me, what are you hoping to do with all of this? I think that the answer that I usually give is I say, I'm interested in being a hospital chaplain or a hospice chaplain, and that's sort of my one sentence answer. But the truth is that I don't know. I don't really deeply know yet, because education is a process of becoming, and I'm deeply in the becoming right now, and I want to, there's a real impetus as an adult, as a professional, as a grad student to say, I have these clear goals, and I'm going to go and accomplish them, and I am trying hard, even though it's not always my first impulse as kind of a type A human, to allow myself that space to say, to not push to narrow myself into a particular box yet. And I think I came out of a life of educating, and I think that piece of my life will show up in my work in another form, and I'm excited and hopeful to find out what form it will take in this next chapter. So I think that has kind of been a surprise and a delight, and I'm grateful to the bottom of my feet for the opportunity to be in a period of a little bit of not formlessness, but of ambiguity, to kind of sit fruitfully in that ambiguity. I'll say the other thing that was maybe shouldn't have been a surprise to me, but is that I really was thinking when I applied about chaplaincy as a one-on-one experience, right? Where it's the service of one person to another, one being to another, one soul to another. And anyone who has been here today knows that advocacy is a huge part of this work. Listening to Dr. Nisa this morning, right? Listening to Dr. Ansari, to Jay, right? All of the incredible advocacy that is going on and that chaplains are engaged in is a kind of necessary part of creating the world that we hope to live in and that we want to see for our communities and for the people we serve. So that is definitely something that has become more clear to me as I've been engaged in my studies.
Well, thank you so much. Let's have a round of applause for our fabulous panelists. Now, it will be my task to summarize the whole conference, and I'll do that in a couple of minutes. But before I do, you've been very patient listeners, and I wonder if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make. We've got time for a couple. Denise, how did I know that you would have the first one?
And while you watch divinity schools close and rabbinical schools close, we're the outreach to those things. And while cooperative MPA, I'm applying for it next year, I, of course, as everybody probably knows now, am the person that when you say chocolate or vanilla goes strawberry. So I'm not understanding why, or it's not that I'm not understanding, but I'm hoping that you do more outreach, so that more schools know about us, more schools are excited to get us. In the video, we have the person that hired for Princeton. Why is she not recruiting HIU students for Princeton Divinity School? Why are we not seeing, why are we keeping ourselves a secret? This place is amazing, like Heather talked about. This cohort of those of us, we love each other like we can't stand. It's 8 women that have no business being friends. But it's like this wonderful, magical place. It's like us. You gotta follow some yellow road to get here and like talk to munchkins or whatever to find out this place. And it shouldn't be like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Another, yes, Joshua.
I think that kind of study is a little space, but that was powerful, and I'll add on to that. Maybe one of the outreach things is I believe that there's a certain type of mindset that gets attracted to this unknown place, and you get into classroom with people who are willing to be in the classroom with the other and learn from the other. However, I was also in a project outside of DC with an effort between Muslim imams and Christian pastors and ministers. And they said to us in a private setting, they said, if our community knew that we were here with Muslims, we would probably get fired. And so they wanted that engagement and that outreach to be secret. And I think there's a lot of different mindsets out there that there is a way for us to engage in, even if it's just to define your line. Just come on this panel and just draw your line in the sand for the rest of us so that we can hear it, as opposed to, thinking that there's going to be some brainwashing to make you feel like we're all going to heaven and things like that. Like, define your line. And perhaps that's a way that will increase the reality of what we will experience when we get out into the world. But also show that Hartford Seminary, Hartford International University for Religion and Peace can cater to more than just the type of mind that that's one.
Yes, Jay.
Yes, I have a question for you, Dr. And I just to say that to learn from you and to be mentored by you has been such a gift. Like Maxwell University would not have happened without Dr. Mosher. She was a huge part of it. As the co-director of the program, how can we as alumni support you?
Thank you for that question. Bilal, you can help me answer it. Yeah, I think the support that we need is a steady stream of fabulous students. And so to help people realize that this is the place they should study is a task for each of you. What else would you say, Bilal?
Just to advocate on behalf of having the ability to think ahead for our program and hire faculty that have that scholar practitioner that can care for the international global we're advising from the community practice so that we're ahead of the curve and not trying to catch up. Just saying that out loud with us is going to help because we are in the program, but that didn't happen.
Thank you. And Denise, last word.
As far as what makes this program work, you asked what worked about the online program. The only thing missing, you would have to be my advisor as well, kind of taking classes with me, drafting and everything for it. The only thing that's missing from our professors is that hub. Your office is open via Zoom all the time, so it's like living next door to you almost. So we don't mix the distance because the doors are so open. So that's what worked through COVID, and that's what's made the online experience not feel so painful. Is the fact that our professors have been accessible, have been close, and have been almost touchable through the screen. And that's something that works. And it's something that is part of what makes this place special.
Thank you. And Christine?
I want to say something I think the program is doing really well at is it allows people at all different levels and all to be in the same class. I was terrified at taking the first online class here. I've never taken that online class before in my life, and the amount of information that not only the waterfall of information, avalanche of information that Dr. Wilson, it was heavenly, and at the same time, the amount of output that the students, appreciate is overwhelming, and yet through one office hour, you were wonderful. Christine, you do what you do. Dr. Cracker said that to me. You do you. And I learned so much, and I think it's so humble of the professors here to allow us to teach each other, to allow us to teach each other. And that's a wonderful plus for this program. Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you. I think you're doing that very well.
Thank you. Thank you. So perhaps, I think that the plan was I was supposed to go over there and give the closing remarks, but maybe I'll just stay here. And I have a combo of remarks that I pulled together last night, and scribbles, because I knew that there was no way I could craft a closing talk for this rich conference without knowing what was going to happen. And so we'll piece it together, but it is truly my honor to be in this chair and sort of pulling together our thoughts for this day. And let me explain that a little bit more. I'm a Christian theologian. My doctorate is from an Episcopal seminary. And one might wonder, how could it be that a Christian theologian even does what I do? So there's that interesting path that my academic career took in terms of formation and exploration. I teach at Hartford. Let's back up a step. This is the 30th anniversary of the receipt of my Master of Arts from this institution. It was awarded to me at the fall convocation in 1992, and my advisor is sitting over there, M.T. Winter. I was encouraged by MT and 2 other professors to get a doctorate. Like, sort of, lady, you need a doctorate, and if you'll just sign up for a program, I'll write a recommendation for you. And it was sort of that way, and that happened. Eventually, there came a time when I was on a bus in DC, I forget exactly why, and I got a phone call from Ingrid Mattson saying, help, 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 we need a co-professor for a course that's starting in a month, and could you possibly co-teach it with me? It was on Christian-Muslim dialogue, and I was thrilled to be asked, and glory be, that was the only week of June that I wasn't already adjuncting for somebody else. So that worked out, and after that experience, over the course of maybe another year or 18 months, it came to be that I was named a faculty associate, and so here I still am. It's been a while. So, to be the co-director with Dr. Bilal Ansari of our new Master of Arts in Chaplaincy program, it's not exactly what was on my career path to-do list way back, and yet it has felt very natural that I've come to this place. Chaplaincy, according to a Buddhist practitioner, is a modern-day discipline and profession at the intersection between a faith tradition and suffering. According to several Christian sources, a chaplain is a person, ordained or lay, who represents a religious or spiritual perspective in an institution or organization which may not be exactly religious or spiritual in its nature, and who ministers to people in need. From a Jewish perspective, it's been said that a chaplain is one who accompanies another's soul. Chaplains, notes Daniel Scipani, who is a Mennonite, so out of the historic Peace Church movement of Christianity. Chaplains serve within challenging realities of spiritual and religious plurality, diversity, and particularity. Hold that together for a minute. We serve in the midst of plurality, diversity, and particularity. Chaplains speak a special language, I've heard Nisa Muhammad say. Chaplains, she says, are trained for this work. Today, we have been celebrating belatedly, because actually it's more than 20 years, but we've been celebrating the 20th anniversary of HIU's training program, which we believe has made quite a mark on the chaplaincy profession. But we can celebrate it only because its graduates have found places to serve and have served brilliantly. Professor Ansari and I are immensely proud of the impact our alumni have had on the field during the past 2 decades, and we're grateful that in addition to Muslims, inquirers from many other religious locations, some easily named and explained, others less defined, now come to us looking for a chaplain formation program. A few are working chaplains eager to improve their multi-religious literacy. Some inquirers want to prepare for their first career. Most want to transition from some other helping profession, such as social work, teaching, psychology, psychological counseling, nursing. All of them want to learn that special language of which Dr. Muhammad speaks. Building on the strengths of our groundbreaking efforts, our new MAC curriculum facilitates development of self-reflective professional identity, ethic of conduct, and practice of compassionate care rooted in one's own epistemological, theological, and spiritual tradition in tandem with concrete skills for working in multi-religious environments. Now, today you've heard some really powerful remarks that it reinforce what I've just laid out. From our president, Joel Lohr, you heard that chaplains exude, the warmth that chaplains exude is palpable. That is my experience of my students, that it is just a pleasure to be with chaplains. We've heard Allison Bowden from Princeton in the video say that chaplains lead from the heart. And we've heard Bilal, Dr. Ansari, stress the importance of having an image of care, how that helps one actually function in the profession. You've heard Dr. Mattson say, if you don't know who I am, how can you accept me as I am? We need to understand the vernacular of the community we serve. That's a really serious thing to keep in mind. You heard Dr. Mattson also say that you have to know who you are, which is why all of you who have ever had me for a student know that I make you explain where you stand. And it's sometimes not easy or comfortable, but if we can't say where we stand, how can we fully appreciate where someone else does? And I love what Dr. Mattson said, that a reminder that there's a place of service for each of us. You don't have to squeeze yourself in a place that isn't right for you. I had to learn that lesson the hard way over the last 30 years, probably several times over. That's an important learning to take with you today. And Dr. Ansari's remark that our secret sauce is that we favor scholar practitioners as instructors. That means that we know a little something, we know a thing or two about what we're sending you out into, and I think that is hugely important. And one of the things we're forming you to be able to do is to negotiate, as Nisa Muhammad put it, chaplains are that kind of caregiver who can negotiate and facilitate ease. That's what we're trying to do through all the many courses, through the fire hose spray of information that Professor Mosher delivers to you each semester. You know, all of that has the purpose of making it possible for you to eventually deliver ease to the people that come to you for care. The poet-philosopher Khalil Gibran wrote, "When you work, you are a flute through whose heart the whispering of the hours turns to music. Which of you would be silent when all else sings together in unison?" Our chaplain alums understand this. Thank you all for helping us to commemorate what Dr. Mattson founded here 2 decades ago, and may you continue to be flutes singing beautiful music, facilitating ease wherever you serve. Thank you.